This is Special Report.
We're called upon one of the strangest things in existence.
Neil Armstrong may have seen extraterrestrials on the moon.
When he spies a discernible shape.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there. And no one, no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Welcome, everybody, to Full Spectrum Universe. My name is Rob Yax. This is the embattled broadcast from behind enemy lines in the once great state of New York. And I'm going to tell you why we say that in a minute, because it is true. New York used to be great, not so much anymore. A lot of politics have made life very difficult to live, but I digress nonetheless. Tonight, we are here for Galactical Beginnings Part 4. If you haven't seen the first 3 parts, no worries. What we're going to do is we're not going to go skim over that stuff, but each one of these individual episodes can stand alone with the information that's being packed into each one. But like we said before, please do us a favor. If you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. Hit the like button, hit that bell, and share this out. Let's wake the world up together, because if not for us, then who, right? We are the ones that we've been waiting for. So we need to get all of this information out to everybody. Just to give you a quick overview of how I've been doing this and how we've been getting things together. Once we finish all the parts and there's no more left to go, I'm going to disclose a 60-lined PDF that's going to have every last source for every bit of information that we are doing. But what I've done is I've taken all the different creation stories in the sense of this universe or this multiverse, because we know it's multidimensional, multi-leveled, and I've found similarities. I've found congruencies. And what I did is I exploited those congruencies by putting them together in one solid timeline. So whether we are wrong or right while doing this, we're going to make you think. And that's really the goal. That's the objective. We want people to think. Nowadays, thinking is a rarity, especially when we're talking about things in the mainstream. We are not mainstream. This broadcast is the ultimate outside broadcast. We do not have any big sponsors. We do not have any gimmicks or sales. Well, hopefully we'll get a sponsor, but I'll never put a sponsor for anybody in front of anybody that I don't truly approve of the product or message that they're putting out there. So with that being said, we've also have a PayPal pinned to the top of the chat. So if you can and will, we are completely listener funded. Donations and tips are greatly appreciated. Or you can become a member of the channel. That always helps as well. But let's get right into the information at hand. So we've been going over the different sides of creation and what was the cause of creation, how it all started. And we're at part 4, where it's about 100 million years back right now. But we're looking at this on a galactical level. So this is a multifaceted, basically a multifaceted story. Last week we told you about the Dracos and what they were doing on Earth. Now we're going to talk about the Patel and what they were doing on Earth, and then we're going to leave Earth completely and go to Mars and Maldek and things like that. So basically what happens is we went over the bad side last week. This side's the good side, the Patel. Let us bring up, and we're at slide 31 right now. So this is all one big presentation, full screen, because it doesn't matter who I am or what I look like. This information is paramount. Share. Let's wake the world up. We have to do this. Again, the forever students that are a part of this community, we call ourselves the forever students because we love to learn and keep learning. So this is Galactical Beginnings Part 4, The War for Earth. So about 100 million years ago, the Ascended Masters, also known as the Patel, the Founders, or the Builder race, and by this point, many other names, had set up a base near the area of Antarctica, right? But Antarctica didn't look like it used to look, or like it looks now. It looked a lot different, whether that was because of continental shift or let's just say it was in a different area. Who knows? But the geology was different. The forests, there were animals that roamed these forests. We're talking about 100 million years ago. Things were way different. So basically what they did is they were monitoring the Draco, and the Draco were farming and breeding. Remember, they were currently underway in this tremendous program to figure out exactly what they could do to suck dry all of the essence of the earth itself and the animals and different types of species that roamed it. The Draco were an expansive race. All they wanted to do was conquer and bleed a place dry and move on to the next one, right? So eventually, these ascended masters, decided that having Earth controlled and inhabited almost exclusively by reptiles wasn't in alignment with the overall unfolding of the destiny of the planet, right? So this led them to drastically try and change this corner of the universe, right? Truly an epic time for Earth as it stands. We've already gone through one specific meteor that came down and knocked out a lot of the extinction that was being played. That was for the Draco's purpose. We also know that there was an extinction level event about 40 to 45 years after, or 35 million years after that specific one. And we can see these areas like we have in the between Florida and Mexico, the Gulf there. They've shown crater impacts regardless. So this is what's being set up right now, is to create life, but they have to do something to the atmosphere first. And we're seeing it. So 65 million years ago, the Cretaceous let me say that right. Cretaceous Paleogen extinct level event using gravitaic technology that essentially lassoed an oxygen-rich comet that was passing by, and they crashed it into Earth. Now, by doing this, what they did is they created more oxygen in the atmosphere for more of the mammal type of species to thrive, as opposed to just the reptiles. Reptiles need little oxygen. They can burrow into the sand. They don't need much, right? But the devastation of this impact led to the extinction of the dinosaurs themselves and to the use of the Earth as a livestock farm for the Draco. Although they're still around today, and the Earth is now very different kind of farm. It's a very different kind of farm, but we're going to get into that much later down the line. Probably, no, definitely not this episode, but probably episode 12 or 13 once we get there, right? So much going on. They do need carbon. Everything is based out of carbon in the physical. Now, we have to understand that when about life right now, it may not be a third density life form that they're trying to create. The Patel are fifth and sixth and seventh density beings. So carbon is something that essentially isn't a necessity just yet, but they want to make life sustainable. So I'm sure that there was carbon involved as well. When I was doing research, not many people mentioned carbon to that point, because that comes later on when we get to Atlantis and Lemuria and the third density and fourth density beings that reside on the planet. So basically what happens now, right? The extinction of the dinosaurs happens. I'm trying to give a graphical style to this so you guys can follow along with pictures as opposed to just listening to me talk. I know that can get very tedious, right? So on we go. The Draco presence was withdrawn from the planet with an exception of a small group of negative Chai-Kar royalty. And remember, the Chai-Kar are the reptilian royal bloodline, whom descended underground. The Chai-Kar also set up dome cities on Venus in order to have another base in the area. And of course, they stayed with their cities on and in the moon, right? We see that Venus is really an uninhabitable place as we understand it. For fourth or fifth density beings, it might not be as bad, mostly fifth and up, but a fourth density, you'll probably still feel it. But they basically made almost like Cloud City in Star Wars, where they would raise above so they could watch Earth from that position. let's keep going. So on Earth, once the dust settled and the atmosphere more oxygen rich and more suitable for the coevolution of both mammals and reptiles, which was more in line with what the ascended masters or the Patel saw as this planet's destiny. Pretty wild, right? So these ascended masters, they reseeded the Earth with the genetic material of many life forms gathered from different planets in our galaxy. And then most of them took off to other areas of the universe itself. One major branch would settle in the area of Arcturus and became those we know as Arcturians. Now, I want to bring this back to me. We have the Arcturians here, which is, they look a little bit blue, and I want to bring it to me for a second. So, one of the things we discussed while we were talking about this is how Earth is almost like an arc ship. And this confirms the fact that the Ascended Masters took mammalian life from all over the galaxy and brought it to Earth. Now, whether that was because they wanted to save these specific entities or these specific animals or creatures, whatever you want to call it, we see that there's this pattern of everything coming back to Earth and residing on Earth. And later on, we're going to talk about Earth as an arc. And all of these genetic codes and all of this genetic anomalies are prefixed on Earth from the time of our third inception, right? And what happens is we're going to figure out that there is animals on the Earth right now which act as external hard drives. So they can back up all of this earthly knowledge and all of this creation that is happening on Earth. Now, when we get there, you're going to be like, holy crap, it's really kind of far out there. But when we look at this as a whole, it's fascinating, right? We know, again, I'm going to say it, that when you go to look up your DNA, you have to hit 23andMe up. Now, what does that 23andMe stand for? The 23 different species in which seeded life on this planet, or this incarnation of man as we're represented right now. So there's a lot that goes with it, right? We know the Arcturians, but here's the thing. One group stayed behind, and we're going to show you that as well. One group stayed behind, okay? And that group was led by Lord Sanat Kumara. And when we get into who this gentleman is, it's going to be wild. But this basically, they set up a fifth density civilization on Venus, right? To oversee the development of life on Earth. And to keep an eye on the Draco, this group was led by Lord Sanat Kumar. And they would eventually become known as the Knackles. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting too. And they played a major role in our history ever since this time. Now, when you go to look up the Knackles, as you can see, the Knackles are spelled Nacaal. We have indigenous tribes on this planet that spell it Naacal, which is basically almost the same word, but with a little bit of a different kind of, instead of the Knackles, it's the Nacles. And these indigenous peoples also spoke of angel-like figures. They spoke of extraterrestrial contact, which is truly, truly wild, because we're talking about this now. Let's go back to the Lord here, because Lord Kumat he looks very much like a Nordic, very much, right? But he's also depicted as an angel, or like an angel with wings and a vibrant sword, almost as if he was set up to be Michael. If we're looking at the Bible and we see, what we're looking at, it almost looks like Michael in the Bible. He's the prettiest, he's the most handsome, he's got wings that are tremendous, he's got this sword that pretty much drops in and destroys whatever he needs to destroy. But Sanat Kumara is this entity that some people even channel now. And when I look, I personally I'm not a channeler. I believe that there's communication that doesn't need to be channeled. I believe in the downloads from these extraterrestrial beings, but this faction of people is still basically in contact with specific people or star seeds on this planet. Omar says this man is prettier than I. Me too, brother. Me too. He definitely is, right? But if you're looking into Sanat Kumara, there's a lot of stories about him out there, right? So let's keep going. Basically, what they did is the Knuckles oversaw life on Earth, and they were the ones that were basically responsible for the life on Earth, right? So we get to the next. We're at 50 million years ago. Life was developing nice on Earth when a group of relatively non-aggressive reptilian hybrids, meaning not exclusively reptilian, as they are, they also had human DNA from Orion and Sagittarius, and arrived, and they petitioned the Knuckles for permission to establish a fifth density civilization on Earth. Now, the Knuckles at first were a little bit hesitant. They weren't sure because of all of the destruction that the other reptilians had caused prior to this moment. So the Knuckles basically gave them permission and granted their request, but with one condition, one caveat, that they not interfere with an intelligent civilization of mammals that was currently flourishing here, and that's the Precipitations, right? So that's me. Now we have mammal-like species, not yet human, but Precipitation, right? So what's going on now is there's the reptilians and the Precipitations are going to be living side by side, but one's fifth density and one resides around the fourth to sixth density. So they're close, but not that close. Okay. So as we keep going, we're going to see that this plays a major part in the next however many millions of years. So let's keep going. And one of the things I want to talk about too is we're going to bring it back to the mammals of this planet and who were the descendants that still live now of these Precipitations. And one of the things that we see is you can go look at skeletons of whales and dolphins, and you will see that they still have a tiny residual hip bone from when they were land creatures, right? When they were land creatures. We're going to show it to you right now. So we see this tiny little, if you're looking at the top picture right now, right at the almost tail, you see this floating bone, right? And this is what the Precipitations turned into, right? As things went on, and we're gonna get into why they de-evolved from that point. But this is essentially what we see when we get to the prehistoric stuff. So let's keep going. So it's known by modern science that whales and dolphins are very intelligent, and that their ancestors walked on land. This is all done via mainstream science. Now, again, I'm not telling you to believe all of science. We know that there's a lot of inconsistencies. When it comes to bones and paleontology, we're looking at this and we're saying, okay, if they have a residual hip bone, they must have had legs at some point. So whether either they were in the water kicking their legs and swimming that way, or they walked on land. Those are the two options that we have here, right? So, but it was known that those ancestors were actually the first intelligent civilization on Earth. The race, the Precipitations, would have a long, peaceful coevolution and then struggle and then eventual war with new groups of settlers, right? So let's keep going. For 8 million years, these two races coexisted. And right there is one of the, it's almost like a dolphin, but this is what they draw are they draw these prehistoric type of animals or dinosaurs, whatever you want to call them, with these legs and hands, and it's really, really wild. And even if we look at the ancient religious texts on this in our timeline right now in this third density, they talk about a fish flopping out of water, and that evolves to become, you know, what we are today, mammals. So, let's keep going here. It's pretty. We're connecting a lot of dots here. It's a little hard to follow, but it's going to make sense, and I'm going to tell you why. So, for 8 million years, these two races had evolved and flourished side by side, developing to the point that there was a high level of technology and spiritual enlightenment on Earth. Right. So the Precipitations lived close to the earth, focusing on the agricultural lifestyle and working on evolving their spiritual and psychic abilities. The reptoids, which are the remnants of what was left over from the reptilians that will have the human DNA in them, were more interested in technology. And the two cultures traded to mutual advantage. The technological advancements of the reptoids made an increased efficiency in the precipitation farming practices. And the reptoids received food and lessons in spiritual development from those few of the race were inclined to. So bring it back to me real quick. So the reptoids were not advanced in the spiritual aspects, but some later on were engaging with the precipitations so much so that they gained levels of consciousness. Remember from when the Dracos were the conquering empire, right? They used brute force. They were 2D and 3D. So just like us now in the 3D reality or the 4th D reality, they're moving their way up. But remember, these reptoids are already 5th dimensional. So it's kind of wild to think about where they would go. And if at one time that 5th dimensional was a different sort of dimension than it is now, right? Maybe that 5th dimensional was physical at that time. Maybe. Who knows? It all depends on the matrix in which they're placed. So a 5 density matrix on this planet would give pretty much a ton of physical aspects to these entities. Now, one of the things that I also found fascinating was that the Knuckles are talked about with the lost island of Mu or Mule, whatever you want to call it, however you pronounce it. And there's a lot of avenues from this research that we've been doing that we can do standalone shows and explore specific points in history down to the finite, because there is textual evidence out there that will show us exactly, or somebody's information that will show us what was going on around what we're talking about now. What I'm giving you now is sort of a general outline, and within those 8 million years, I'm sure that there are stories that are coming out from that time period that will give you an essence of what those cultures were truly about, right? So I'm just kind of giving you that overview because there's so much time to cover when we're doing this. So let's get back. So billion years again, these races, they coexisted, but all was going quite well for a long time. But eventually, the old enemy of the mammalian form, the race of pure blood negative Chayakar, who had gone into long hibernation underground, woke up. And they didn't like what they saw happening to the world above. Now, this is where things get a little wild, right? And this is what the title of this specific episode is called, is the War for Earth. Because we're going to get to this, and this is going to get a little bit graphic and a little bit wild, but it has to be talked about. They began to contact their reptoid cousins on the surface and did their best to sow seeds of resentment towards the Precipitations. The resentment that the reptoids were predisposed towards anyway due to their genetic heritage. Now, again, bring it back to me real quick. We talk about genetics and being able to access and become aware of specific DNAs within ourselves now to enhance our state of being in this moment right now. So if these entities were doing this so much longer before us, it can go in the adverse direction as well, right? And it's you don't usually hear about those times, which I thought was fascinating because I mean, I don't like to see people digress in that way, but seeing how their genetics affected their predisposition towards something else or another species is fascinating because we are bringing people together with with the information and the shows that we do and exploring ideas, and we're trying to basically reach a threshold that people start to engage in their own forms of research from that threshold. And when we say specific things, whether it's, in the chat or somebody hears something specific, all of a sudden it feels like their DNA turns on. This is what this awakening process is about, is being able to get people to engage on a level that's more spiritual as opposed to more physical, right? With meditations, and maybe a meditation can make you aware of some sort of piece of DNA inside of you that brings you information, right? And we're seeing this happen in real time. So let's keep going. Basically, they began to make contact and the genetic heritage. We just talked about that. The reptoids had always been subconsciously envious and sometimes outwardly hostile towards the Precipitations' proficiency with psychic abilities. A proficiency that some of the reptoids did manage to develop, but only very few. Now, let's talk about what's happening on Earth right now and how our type of community, right, is seen by outsider communities in the sense of people who are not into this stuff. And they say, oh, that's foo-foo. You're just making shit up. All different types of things. They hurl the onslaughts and ad hominems because whether it could be envy, it could be jealousy, it could be the fact that they don't want to do specific pieces of work to get themselves to those points. So we see patterns repeating themselves and how this happens on this planet from those points forward, right? Because this is the beginning of mammals and reptiles and entities truly colonizing this earth. So this is a pattern that plays out in our DNA right now. So is it passed down from these entities that started it so long ago? Who knows? Who knows? But something to think about. Something to think about. Let's keep going. So now it took a long time, but eventually the Chikar poisoned the culture of the reptoid civilization to the point that they began to mistrust and turn on the Precipitations. Eventually, this friction led to war between these two groups, or rather, it would have led to war. Now, here's where it gets wild, right? So, we know that these entities have a higher density. They have abilities that we may not be privy to, or only some of us are privy to right now. So, if the Precipitations had not preempted it, the more advanced beings among the race, the leaders who had developed the ability to step outside of the stream of time and see the past and probable futures, saw this coming long before it actually happened. And they had set their course in motion thousands of years before the war actually began. So, again, because of the enhanced consciousnesses of these beings, I know it sounds funny, these consciousnesses, they were able to predict this outcome. So, without actually, this is a war, and it will turn into this war, but not the war that we know, where one side attacks the other and we're waiting for that to happen. And then everybody goes back and forth. There is one step that happens, and that's the war. That's it. And it's because of these abilities that these Precipitations have. And one of the things I want to say is that even enhanced consciously as these entities were, they're not perfect, nor are they void of the polarity of good and evil. nor do they transcend this ability to roll on the dark side for a while. So it's fascinating to me. We look at these entities with reverence and say, you know what? I think that there's something so amazing about them, and that they're always so enlightened, and they don't do this and they don't do that. Sometimes when civilizations are being threatened, entities will take matters into their own hands. And we see that now. We see that with the way that certain nuclear facilities go offline when people are getting prepared to essentially shoot off missiles, right? We see nuclear power plants being shut down close to where reactors are going to explode. We see people intervening, right? So with these Precipitations having the Patel around and these ascended masters, it would only be right that they would intervene, right? So let's keep going. They selected a portion of their race and began to undergo gene mutation, evolving rapidly into a species that could live in the oceans of the earth, so that their presence on the planet can be maintained after the inevitable conflict that they foresaw. So what they do? They decided to go the route of passive but protective of their species, as opposed to the direct back and forth fight, right? So, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. We want a little too, so let's keep going. So now, when the reptoids launched their attack, even though they were a much more aggressive and technologically advanced race, they didn't stand a chance. Even nuclear and scalar weapons, both of which the reptoids possessed, were no match for the power of the Precipitations consciousness, a group mind that could manipulate matter itself. Now you see that the reason these entities went into the ocean was because of the massacre that they were about to indulge themselves into, or they wouldn't have to watch the fallout of what they did. And again, let's keep going. It gets pretty wild. So the ocean dwelling Precipitations were well established at this point. So when the reptoids attacked the land dwelling Precipitations, remember they only took a group of Precipitations and put them in the ocean. But the land dwelling Precipitations took to their interstellar ships the technology for which had been, ironically, developed alongside the reptoids in the most peaceful times. Once the Precipitations race was off planet and their cousins safely underwater, they used their group mind to penetrate the reptoids' incredibly power fusion reactors. And with a little mental nudge, it was all that was required to implode these reactors, resulting in nuclear explosions that decimated 98% of the reptoid population. 98% were destroyed. So again, even though these entities are evolved, they are not without their travesties as well. Right? And it's wild how even when faced with, I guess, destruction, these evolved entities still took it upon themselves to wipe out civilizations, right? And we see this. We see this throughout time when we talk about the Galactic Federation and things like that. Not everybody's a part of that. So the 2% who survived fled to Maldek, also called Tiamat, a planet that used to be part of our solar system, but which is now our asteroid belt. And when we get to Tiamat, we're going to go in. And after we get through the Maldek and the Melchizedeks, obviously where names come from, things get to be a lot more convoluted, or a lot more I guess a lot more in your face and very direct. which is pretty wild. Right now, we're kind of pondering on what we're thinking, but when we get to that specific war, a lot of things will change in this universe. So let's keep going. So this is where things get really cool, but we're going to stay there for a second. So, not a very spiritually advanced choice on the part of the supposed evolved Precipitations, you might say, right? But here's the hard truth. Even those who have progressed to advanced states of consciousness, when confronted with either destruction of their race or another, they will often choose self preservation. Besides, there was more at stake than their own survival. The earth herself was at stake, right? So let's think about it. Now, the entities being able to see forward in time, back in time, and looking at all possible options, you would have to understand that they definitely didn't, they made an educated decision as opposed to just rifling off a missile and here goes half of creation, right? So they know that there is something more for Earth. And they know that once they get through this moment, the Earth will become its arc self, its archetype, right? We're going to have it. We're going to go into that. And that's for another episode. But we're getting towards the end of the information now. And then we're going to talk about this because I want to see what you guys have to say at the end of this episode because there's a lot we're going back and forth, right? So let's keep going. Now, the wise ones of the Precipitations looked down many time streams and consulted with Lord Sanat Kumara and the Knuckles. Remember the Knuckles on Venus. And in the end, all were in agreement that this path was the one that would lead to the best possible outcomes for the most beings. When you only have hard choices, you have to sometimes choose the best hard choice. And I know it sounds kind of cliche, but it's the truth. It's the truth. And when we're looking at this in a grand scale, we wouldn't be where we are now without them doing that. So is it worth it? I'm not gonna say yes or no because it's not up to me, right? It's just something that we're looking at. So let's keep going. So now that they had rid the Earth of the aggressive, war-minded reptilians, mostly that is, the ones underground were still alive and kicking, the Precipitations, now the Sations, could establish a safe haven for the flourishing of their offspring, who would become our present-day whales and dolphins, who still perform a very important service to our planet right now. So this is where it really wild, right? So their group consciousness has held the memory of our Earth since that time, and they have preserved that genetic memory through times when our planet's consciousness field had collapsed, resulting in total wiping out of the planet's Akashic memory, the information of all lives ever lived on a particular planet, stored in the planet's electromagnetic gravitic field. So the whales and the dolphins act as an external hard drive, and from time to time, when our Earth's memory banks have been corrupted or wiped out, the Sations have been there to quickly upload the backup. Right? Think about that for a second. So that's the last slide we have for tonight. But I mean, that's crazy. We know that, the dolphins are the record keepers. We see this in prominent tales where they talk about the dolphins and the whales and how they truly are a piece of this planet. And, they reside within the genetic makeup of this planet. And it's pretty wild to see that they are like the backup external hard drives. I think to me that's pretty crazy. So if you guys have any questions, ask away, and I'll do my best to answer it right now without giving too much on the next topic is just going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy, and I'm gonna kind of give you a title of what we're looking at. I can look into the future and you know tell you what it's going to be. But this part to me was like, wow, it truly was just crazy, 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 crazy time. So the next part is going to be the Lyran expansion, the Orion Wars, and the creation of the Anunnaki. I've already been working on it, and this one is going to be wild. I mean, this one was pretty wild, but as we get like further and further into the galactical, more modern, we see these patterns that we've already talked about in the first four episodes of this play out more and more. And Omar has it's really good right here. He says, I've done videos with Stephen and Evan Strong, and that tells us in depth about our connection with the dolphins. Yes, and the whales. And this is what I'm talking about. This is how amazing that we can basically get confirmation from a lot of different, I guess, a lot of different avenues out there, kind of collecting the data, right? So, I mean, truly, but again, we see this pattern, and we're not the only planet, and I'm sure all the planets out there, like Syria, Arcturi, the Arcturian planets, Alpha Centauri, I'm sure that they all have their mammals or entities that are their Akashic backup too, right? And this is kind of like where we go back and forth between the Akashic record and the genetics, and how we can tap into that now. And when we do that, how it's wild, because again, we're talking about becoming aware of things, right? And I'm kind of stuttering because my brain is going 1,000 miles a minute, but we want to become aware of things. And now with this information, being able to put these connections together, maybe during your meditation, see if you can reach out and talk to the dolphins, or come in contact with the dolphins of the Akashic record, or maybe those are the ones that hold the information and can show you around, right? Really, I mean, it gets really, really crazy from these points. So, this episode has been a lot of fun. So I want everybody to please, again, I'm going to ask, share this information to everybody, because while it resonates with a lot of people in the chat, as I've been seeing, let's resonate with those who may not be as spiritually advanced as the forever students, right? And let's make an effort to wake these people up together. So hit that bell, subscribe, like this stream. Let's do this. Let's get everything going. So with that being said, my name is Rob Yox. I know these episodes haven't been a full hour, but I'm trying to compartmentalize this information so you can take it dose by dose, and not, give it to you all in a 6-hour session. Plus, I don't want to talk for 6 hours straight. I don't really think you want to hear my voice for 6 hours straight either. But, with that being said, everybody love one another, show that love, be the implementation of love on a daily basis. Show people the way, right? Love is infectious. Smiles are infectious. Smile at somebody. Pay things forward. Spread that sort of positivity, and it will trickle towards everybody else around you. If you have to, once you understand where you've come from, and this is one of the reasons why we're doing this, because a man or a woman who doesn't know where they come from is a man or woman lost. Now we can say we're not lost, right? We can say that we can go forward and say, this is who we are. This is where we came from. And mainstream media won't tell you that. Mainstream history won't even dive into this stuff because it's too taboo. It's too foo-foo for them, but not for us. Not for us. So with that being said, well, one more thing. We've had a lot of requests for the wing makers. And when I tell you that I found the mother lode on the wing maker, I am not even exaggerating, right? So more to come. We may do another episode tomorrow, the next day. So, we'll talk about it. And I see we have actually one question, and it's mosquitoes and insects. Where do they come from? Well, we know that all the animals on this planet either came from somewhere else or are genetics of something somewhere else. So if we see that there are entities out there who are of the, I guess, insectoid type of nature, I'm sure that these are ancestors of them, or their genetics are basically held within these animals. So if anything is to ever happen to that race, people can come here, or entities can come here, take that genetic code and simulate that civilization, right? Pretty good question. Pretty good question. But that's that. So with that being said, my name is Rob Yox. Thank you everybody for joining me this evening. It's been Full Spectrum Universe, and we'll see you next time.